Hello beautiful friends, welcome to my channel. I'm really glad you're here. Today's video is a reading of an essay I wrote as a contribution to a digital collection titled For Some. The name of the collection calls attention to the United States' failed promise of liberty and justice for all. And regardless of your feelings about or experiences of Independence Day, it is undeniable that our shared, stolen land, our so-called nation, does not deliver life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to all who live here. The essays in this collection are offered by Black, brown, and trans contributors, and I hope that as you consider this holiday, that you can hold these voices in your heart and recognize the gap between what the United States claims and what it has revealed itself to be. The link to the collection is forsomecollection.com, and I will include the link in the description to this video. But without further ado, in the spirit of proper American citizenship. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they declare the causes which impel them to their separation. When I was in the 5th grade, I memorized the Declaration of Independence of my own volition. I was born white and with a dick, things I share in common with every one of its signers. And I interpreted the words promised by the document as written on my behalf, my salvation from injustice, my promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These are things I still feel entitled to, but which I have come to recognize would only be provided by America if I was to be more successful in destroying my empathy and integrity, if I could have fit the expected script of my life a bit more closely. Living in Texas in an evangelical family meant, of course, that I was male and heterosexual. Time would demonstrate that neither of these were true. And while I privately suspected from a very young age that I was different than who I was supposed to be, it took a long while to reconcile what that difference might mean, what it was costing those around me. Instead, I was blinded by the narrative of America as an underdog, and I did not know any other truth. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the 6th grade, I awoke to the realization that the truth, no, hypocrisy, contained in this document was not enough to deliver me, and that even if it was, it would not deliver us all. This awakening was slow at first, beginning only with the recognition of its many contingencies. The indignation expressed in this document paralleled my own silent suffocation in the prison of dysphoria. My advantages were predicated on violence, either violence against myself or those around me. And it became clear that this vision of all men being created equal only included me if I pledged as much allegiance to my genitals as I did to my white man God. That this nation, which gaslit me into allegiance in youth with empty promises of liberty and justice for all, was in fact imprisoning everyone, many quite literally behind bars, more than anywhere else in the world, but all of us in spirit. The more I listened and learned, the more the choice became clear. America or liberty, allegiance or justice. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. To believe, as I do, that all beings possess certain unalienable rights is to stand in opposition to the form of government we call America. This is not new. It is not as if we lost our way. The way was never found to begin with. It was all pretend. Selfishness, entitlement, and arrogance masquerading as liberty. Hypocrisy dressed up as moral superiority. Confronting this hypocrisy required a choice between the structures that professed the ideology and the ideology itself. To love America or to love what I ignorantly believed it stood for. Unlike countless others who were born into a state of difference, who saw the hypocrisy from the beginning, I lived for many years desperately trying to make my prison cell a home. to conceal, deny, and eliminate my difference by any means necessary in the pursuit of my own happiness. Understanding the hypocrisy of America was not my origin, but my inheritance. And the pursuit of liberty and justice for all required a great deal more unlearning than allegiance, and a declaration of my own independence from the bullshit. All experience hath shewn that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty, to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. My unlearning has been slow, slower than I would like to admit, and I fear it will never end. Can I ever rid myself entirely of the propaganda? I must try. We must try. How? By listening closely, patiently, to demand more of ourselves than the repetition of hypocrisy. Of all the documents I could have memorized, and my life, my teachers, the state, led me to the Declaration of Independence. And no matter how hard we try, there is no escaping its effect on our way of life. Had my education been given to me by someone wise enough or abject enough to see the hypocrisy, perhaps I could have chosen to impress upon myself another perspective, a different legacy. But this is the legacy I was given. This is the hypocrisy I was encouraged to valorize. A nation where genocidal white men were heroic underdogs, and where raping, pillaging, and land theft were God's providence. May every action of my life henceforth undo the patriotic idolatry of my youth. We must stop repeating the lies. Stop believing that a system which claims to provide liberty and justice for all, but which was constructed on basic dignity for a select few wealthy white Christian men, is in many ways worse than a system which at least does not pretend to be better than it is. We must choose to listen to other voices, especially the voices most erased by America. Only by listening to other voices, both the voice inside myself which called for liberation, as well as the voices of those suffering around me, did I find myself increasingly horrified at every broken promise included in the document that I consumed as truth. These many voices transformed my experience of America. I used to live in an America of constant praise, affirmation, and the promise of greatness, the assurance by many grade school teachers that I would one day become president, as if that were a desirable position to hold. The America I live in now is one in which I am regularly harassed on the street, and chased through public spaces, mocked, and denied basic dignity, while those people tasked with carrying out the law only succeed at protecting private property, at defending the wealthy, at murdering the disenfranchised. The history of America is at least as much genocide and slavery as liberty and justice. There are 328.2 million or so Americans, people living in America. How many of us have life, liberty, and the ability to pursue what happiness means to us? How many of us are homeless? How many of us are imprisoned? How many of us struggle to find food, much less food that nourishes our bodies? How many of us are at risk of violence because of who we are or how we express ourselves? How many of us are a single health crisis or natural disaster away from financial ruin? How many of us are trapped in a cycle of debt? How many of our voices are suppressed at the polls? How many of us are chronically depressed, anxious, or suicidal? How many of us actually feel connected to our jobs and communities? How many of us are in peril of the changing climate? Because there is no such thing as America, really. Certainly not any single thing. There are 328.2 million or so people living in a plot of land whose only boundaries are violence and weapons. This thing we call America is really just the collective experiences of the people struggling to live here. Our experiences as citizens of a nation are the only thing which make it real. There is not one America, but 328.2 million different experiences of America, which means there are 328.2 million Americas. And the idea that there was ever one America, much less one that could be considered great, is just an illusion of forced fraternity, one which silenced all voices of critique and dissension, one which claimed stolen land as its God-given destiny, and one which built its economy by tearing people from their homes, separating them from their families, reducing them to property, and forcing them into generations of brutalized labor. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. One of the fundamental problems of nationalism is the assumption that our experiences have something in common, that wealthy white Christian men can write a document on our behalf, that they could even imagine a vision of society that would service us all. Obviously, the lives of Americans, no, people living in America, have something in common, but each of our lives share something in common with every other being in the world. And whatever it is that makes me so-called American is a much less unifying force than that which makes me queer, which makes me trans, which makes my body exploited by capitalism. No, 1% of the population who hold more wealth than the entire middle class, which makes me enraged that more of my taxes go to weapons and violence than education and public health, while these wealthy white men pay no taxes at all. I am not convinced that there is any form of government equipped to equitably govern 328.2 million different experiences, but it does not take much to imagine ones which are better than what we are currently situated with. We can imagine better visions than America, and these imaginations become reality every time we choose to prioritize the principles of liberty and justice for all over the structures which lied to us about providing them. Boundaries only cohere for as long as we believe in them, for as long as we violently reinscribe them on our maps and hearts. And why, then, should we find ourselves surprised that in a nation committed to keeping those boundaries alive by building walls and cultivating fear, that we struggle to perceive that which unites us across our differences? This is by design. Perhaps tearing the nation apart is not as effective as simply disregarding the demands of citizenship. One of the many things that history teaches us is that while revolutions may often be successful at grinding systems to a halt, revolutions alone contribute nothing in the way of establishing a better system. That is the less sexy, much harder work which is up to us. It requires that we let go of arrogance, heroism, and exceptionalism. There is no declaration that will save us. We must save ourselves. We must save one another. To choose within ourselves that we have no regard for our citizenship, which requires boundaries, normativity, violence, and exclusion. We must live first and foremost as a certain kind of people who are deeply committed to equity, who value ourselves as a part of our communities and our communities as a part of ourselves, who recognize the interconnection between ourselves and every other being, regardless of what commonalities and differences exist. We must choose one another over our nation. We must choose contentment over consumption. Render citizenship incoherent. Tear apart the boundaries of the nation with your disbelief. Tear apart the boundaries of yourself with love. Share dignity, respect, worth, and liberation with every being you encounter. There is no government which can do this for us, and there is no government which can stop us. America ceases to exist as soon as we stop believing in it. Believe in something better. Happy Independence Day. Please check out the entire collection of essays and hear some other beautiful, vulnerable voices that provide a clearer picture of what this day really means. You can find the link in the description of this video or by going to forsomecollection.com. And if you enjoyed today's video or it meant something to you, please like and subscribe. Your support means a great deal to me as I want to provide reflections which speak to you. And thank you for watching. I wish you peace and perspective. I love you all as I love myself as we are part of the same world. And I look forward to talking with you again soon.